How you doing?
People don't know the devices they have at school and so today my phone book got disconnected or shut down. Well,
Packets, it's not so good.
The recording is on.
Are we ready?
If you can't get back to that person, just think about it.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's go ahead and call our council meeting work session to order.
Thank you, Mayor. We have several items on the consent agenda which we'll go over during the work session, and then you can begin your regular meeting.
Sure.
The first two items on the consent agenda are minutes from previous meetings. The first one, item 1 on the consent agenda, is the special meeting that City Council had with the Parks and Rec Citizen Advisory Board. We held that at TechWorks to go over the master plan for the Parks and Rec program. That was on August 28th. Those minutes are included for your consideration. The second item on the consent agenda is adoption of the regular meeting minutes from your last meeting on September the 3rd. The next couple items are for special events in town. Item 3 is approval of an ordinance to close multiple streets on December the 3rd for the annual Christmas parade, same as we typically do. Item 4 similarly is approval of an ordinance to close multiple streets on November the 28th for the Turkey Day 5K. That's a Thanksgiving morning event that we've done for many years. Item 5 on consent agenda is for a new event. It's an ordinance to authorize the sale, possession, and consumption of alcoholic beverages. In this case, it's a Gantt Park for Serving for Soldiers Suicide Awareness event, and that will be a volleyball tournament, as I understand it, for raising money for soldier suicide prevention. And that event is on November the 9th.
November the 9th, yeah.
The next item on the consent agenda is something we don't do very often. It's an ordinance enacting and adopting the supplement to the Code of Ordinances. So when the City Council adopts or updates ordinance out of the Code of Ordinance book, so not the zoning ordinance, but the regular, the rules and the laws that the police department enforce, you adopt the ordinances, but then you also have to adopt an ordinance adopting the supplement. So the city clerk has codified the ordinances from the last 2 years and has those hard copies in your mailboxes. But this, you have to adopt an ordinance approving the overall supplement to the Code of Ordinances. That's a state law for all towns over 5,000 population. So the ordinances have been on the books, we've been enforcing them. This is just a second thing that we have to do to be compliant with general statutes. Also, next item, item 7 on the consent agenda, is approval of an agreement for school community cooperation. And this is a 3-year rolling agreement that we have with Gaston County Schools for use of each other's recreational facilities. Primarily, we get the use of the Belmont Middle School, gymnasium. Sometimes we get Belmont Central Elementary School, multi-purpose room for youth basketball. And also the county gets to use some of our fields, and we don't charge each other. This is an agreement we've had in place since
A long time.
Yeah, for several decades now, and it's a 3-year agreement. This would go from October 1st, 2019 through September 30th of 2022. That agreement works out well for us. Item 8 on the consent agenda, if you recall, I believe at the August City Council meeting, our Planning Director Shelley DeHart gave a presentation on the Downtown Belmont Development Association's plan to do signal box art wrap in the downtown area. And we told you then the DVDA would pay for this program, but the city had to apply for permission from NCDOT to have the art wrap on the DOT traffic signals. DOT has now told us that they have a more formal process for applying for this encroachment agreement, and that includes a resolution approved by the City Council. So there's a resolution in your packet that outlines our requirements and for maintenance and everything else for that signal box art wrap. So upon approval of that resolution, then we can apply for the encroachment agreements and get that project going. Then item 9 on the consent agenda is a resolution supporting the North Carolina Department of Transportation projects in Gaston County and requesting a continuation of funding for them. As I've emailed you, and I think it's been in the newspaper, because of kind of a cash crunch statewide, NCDOT is suspending work on preliminary engineering for approximately 900 transportation projects statewide, a couple dozen here within Gaston County. As far as we know from the MPO and from DOT, this does not affect the start date for construction on these projects. It's only affecting the preliminary engineering, which can sometimes take a long time leading up to these projects. But as we know, Gaston County is a growing area, particularly Belmont. Eastern Gaston County is growing. A lot of the traffic that moves through town is from other parts, east or west, north and south of us. So it's important for Belmont to have transportation projects throughout Gaston County and throughout our region. So for what good it will do, we'd like to have a resolution to have the City Council on record supporting, asking DOT to find the funding to continue this preliminary engineering and don't stop progress that we've made through the MPO on getting projects funded through Gaston County.
Yeah.
So if this is approved, we would send it to NCDOT leadership as well as our state delegation.
Adrian, I'm certainly in favor of that. Richard and I were both at the MPO, and when the Gazette article came out, there was no timeline involved, but correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, they didn't make it sound like there's going to be a huge amount of time. It's more federal funds need to be dispersed and all the paperwork and details that had to be done. So I think that the Gazette article made it sound much worse than hopefully it would be. So just, is that what your understanding was, Richard, or not?
Yeah, and I've heard from a lot of people who read the article that way,
Yes.
and I was trying to explain to them that basically what you said, there's a delay in preliminary design work,
Yeah.
but the construction dates haven't been affected, but apparently it wasn't, it didn't read that way to a lot of folks. So, you know, some kind of clarification may be in order, because there's a big misconception out there that these projects are stalled.
Yes, and one of the projects where preliminary engineering was started and now is suspended is the replacement of the Wilson Boulevard Bridge over the Catawba River, which clearly is one of our most important projects. Because that has to get replaced before DOT widens I-85. So, you know, even if it's just a few months of suspension of the engineering, that's a few months that we really don't have. We want to keep them on task for all these projects so that it doesn't end up being a delay potentially for construction.
Okay.
So those are all the items on the consent agenda.
All right. That being said, we can go ahead and continue on the regular agenda.
Adrian, I've got a question, if I can ask that now on
Yes.
the consent agenda.
Sure.
Item number 5, I wanted to ask you about that. They're asking us to, and I don't know if I'm just saying, maybe there's no conflict here in messaging, but when I read it, and I know some fellows that have PTSD, and they've served and they've got a lot of problems with alcohol and substance abuse. So when I read this, you know, I support the event, but we've got an event, Serving Soldiers Alcoholic Beverage Sales Agenda Memo, and we're having an event, Serving for Soldiers Suicide Awareness Event, and we're serving alcohol at that event, or alcohol is being served, and alcohol is a major contributor to people with PTSD and you know, any kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, and alcohol is a big part of that. I mean, I just asked the question, does anybody else feel that that's conflict in messaging at all?
So messaging is outside of my area of expertise.
Sure.
But this is not a city event. This is a nonprofit group that came to the city and requested to rent Gant Park to have this day-long volleyball tournament to raise money for soldier suicide prevention and awareness. And as part of what they want to do, they want to offer beer and wine for sale. So this is something that they came up with and they requested. This is not something the city offered. So when they said we would like to be able to sell beer and wine, We as staff obviously don't have the authority to do that because we have an ordinance prohibiting that in parks. So the only way to get that approved is through the ordinance, just like you did for Oktoberfest this past weekend.
But I think
It's only up
primarily
to the
it's just
council
a-
whether or not to
Let
support
me ask,
that.
let me ask a quick follow-up question, because I know that we've been worried about the impact of too much use of the field and resodding the field. I mean, is this going to do any damage to the field, or is everybody okay with it? Is there any
So-
residual effects?
Yeah, this does not conflict with our fall soccer program. And over the summer, we did have a grass volleyball program that was well-received and did not mess up the fields.
Okay.
Richard, I agree with you. It seemed like a mixed message. I think if it were our event, we definitely would not want to have alcohol, but if that group, if they figure that it mixes well with theirs, then I think it's kind of not in our purview.
Well, you know, again, I wasn't sure if I was going to bring it up or not. I wasn't sure if I was seeing a boogeyman where there wasn't one, but when I looked at it, I mean, I didn't serve. I don't have PTSD, but I know fellas who do. And I know they struggle a lot with alcohol, so when I saw there was, it's for suicide of soldiers, and we're serving alcohol at the event, I was just honest with you, I was a little conflicted on it.
Well, just to clarify, we're not serving
Right.
alcohol.
Well,
It's
I understand it,
the
but
event organizer
we're
are
sanctioning,
requesting
we're
this.
sanctioning it if we
Yes.
approve it.
So you have the authority to approve it. We don't as staff.
And the question is how many people are going to be
If you choose not to, that's fine with
there
us.
that have those symptoms and everything like that too. It's a fundraiser for them, and they're playing volleyball, so I'm not sure how that's going to be affected by soldiers. So, okay. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay. All right. That being the case, let's go ahead and move to call the meeting to order. Does anybody want to volunteer to do the invocation for us today? If not, I'll do it. And the Pledge of Allegiance. You want to do the pledge, Martha?
Sure.
All right. Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us this opportunity to gather together as a city. Let all of us be able to help each one of us to go ahead and live in a better place and a better community. And this we ask in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You got to sign up sheets. All right, we're going to give a little recognition here. Let me climb on out. I had dinner, so I had a little trouble squeezing out, so. I can put it over, okay, that's fine. You got the mic. Patricia? Patricia Franks. This is a certificate of recognition for you for all the effort and work you put in on the planning board. Thank you so much. I'm going to read this. It says, whereas Patricia Brennan Franks has served the city of Belmont as a member of the Planning and Zoning Board with dedication and distinction, and these years of service have been marked by exemplary and energetic leadership in the vital accomplishments of this board. And whereas during her tenure, Patricia devoted her time and interest to matters affecting the city of Belmont and its extraterritorial jurisdiction. And whereas these years of service have been marked by commendable dedication to the best interests of the community, as she has worked constantly for the betterment of its economic, cultural, and aesthetic development. And whereas she has contributed to the growth and development of our area, and her influence is still being felt. Now therefore, I, Charles R. Martin, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor and on behalf of the Belmont City Council and all citizens of Belmont, do hereby go on record as commending Patricia Franks for her outstanding efforts and voicing our appreciation for her leadership in all areas of our community improvement. Thank you, Patricia.
served 2 terms, and it was my honor to serve those 2 terms. My main issue during those whole 2 terms has been housing affordability, and it's my hope that the Planning and Zoning Board will keep up that torch, and I look forward to working with Shelley on the new Housing Affordability Task Force that we're about to start, because with median home incomes in Belmont being upwards of $300,000 and a 12% below the poverty rate, we have a lot of work to do, and I hope that the planning board is up to the task.
We interviewed candidates tonight.
Thank you.
You want to take a picture of Shelley? Thank you. Congratulations, Patricia. Let me climb back here. If we can find our sign-up sheets here, I do. Public comment, okay. Get to that page there. I got it right. All right, the first person I have.
Do the consent agenda.
Do I have a motion to approve the
I'll
consent
make that
agenda?
motion.
I second.
I got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Any opposed? No. All right, we're good. Public comment. First person we have signed up is Oscar Reed. Now, when you come up to speak, say your name and your address and your reason. And you have, on our high, technically hourglass, you have 2 minutes. Three, I'm sorry, 3 minutes, excuse me.
Oscar, you got you to talk to her.
Yeah.
3 minutes, I'm sorry.
Oscar Reed, 300 Todd Street, Belmont, North Carolina. The mayor, city council, and the audience, and all those out in the lobby. As you already probably know, city council especially, it's our annual fundraiser at the Hood Memorial Church, 215 Sackler Street here in Belmont. We're having our annual Porter Pit Friday, November the 1st. That's on a Friday. We're talking about a half barbecue or 5 smoked ribs with baked beans, coleslaw, roll, and dessert. Eat in or carry out. Delivery, 5 or more plates. I'll be very willing to get a phone call. My number, just so some may remember, 704-674-7604. But we're inviting you to come. It's our fundraiser for the year. We always have it each and every year. And it's the Porter Pit at Hood Memorial Church in Belmont.
What time does it start and
That
end?
begins at 10 o'clock.
10?
And ends at 7, or if we've sold out. But it ends at 7 o'clock. Yes, sir, PM. All right, thank you very much.
And that's on the 1st?
Thank you.
Yes, sir, November the 1st.
Okay, I got you
10
there.
a.m., right?
10 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay. Next person we have signed up to speak. I'm going to turn this back over this way because I'll just look at my watch. We only have 1 hourglass now, so the other one broke. Julie Seligman Gregory. State your name and your address, and you got 3 minutes.
Hi, my name's Julie Seligman Gregory. I'm at 611 North Central Avenue in Belmont. It looks like you guys have already approved Girls on the Run and Turkey Day, and that's what I was coming to ask for permission. This year's Turkey Day race on Thanksgiving morning, we will be giving money to Socks in North Belmont, and Catherine's House will be our charities this year. So,
Very good.
Great event. It's a great event.
it's a lot of fun. Last year we had 675 participants. The police chief was wonderful to work with. So this year, we're doing the same course we had last year, which worked out fabulous and a lot safer. So we're very blessed that the City of Belmont Police Department, and we've worked well with them, and Adrian has been a contributor to this. Adrian actually started the race with Chad Nelson, if anyone doesn't know.
What's the date again, Julie?
November the 28th, Thanksgiving morning at 8 o'clock.
November 22nd?
28th
28th, I'm
this
sorry.
year.
Okay.
And we do receive a lot of support with Girls on the Run, which is on December the 7th, from the City of Belmont. We're very blessed to have that support, just so you know that. And unbelievable community to work with. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, it cleared out, so we're good. Next person we have signed up is Richard Fox.
Actually, I signed the wrong page. I should be on item 2. Right?
Oh, item 2. I'll change your name, all right?
I didn't get my phone.
All right, Richard Fox. Okay. You can tell she's 723 Hannah Woods, right? All right. Next person we have sign up is in Robert Odell. Is Robert Odell here?
He is, I believe he signed up for the wrong
Oh, he did.
case. He should be.
Which item is he signing up for?
The first public hearing for the zoning amendment 2019-04. The same one you just did.
Item 2.
Yes, it should be that one. Yeah, the Alberta. That one.
All right, Robert Odell.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
All right. Okay, what's the name off that one? Put it on the other one then, okay. That's all the folks we have signed up for public hearing on the open administration. Next we have a public hearing on a request to relinquish City of Belmont zoning designation from 113 Alberta Avenue in the ETJ in order to be annexed by the town of Cramerton. Parks?
I'll make a motion to go in public
Motion, you
hearing.
went public hearing,
Second.
okay? Second? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're in public hearing, okay?
Well, I'll get started without our technology here.
That's all right,
So,
Shelley.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As read into the record, this is zoning amendment 2019-04. The applicant, Robert Odell, on behalf of the property owners, Frankie Odell and others, have filed this petition to amend the city's official map. Thank you. See my technology here. Okay, there we go. The subject property is 113 Alberta Avenue here in Belmont. Parcel ID number is 185724. The request is to rescind Belmont zoning designation that would allow the opportunity for the property owners to petition the town of Cramerton for annexation and subsequent zoning designation so the property can be subdivided. So the impetus for this request is the property owners wish to subdivide their lot. The property is actually in the city's ETJ area. It is zoned rural residential where there's a 2-acre minimum. The subject property is just over 2 acres in size, therefore it would not be able to be subdivided under its current designation. I'll go back here. There's an aerial photograph of the subject property. Playing around. Sorry, there's a delay. Up in the right-hand corner, you can see it is a large property within a residential community along Alberta. It is just north of Wilkinson. To the west is a mini storage facility. To the north, south, and east is all single-family residential. This is a zoning map that shows that it is zoned rural residential as well as the other residential lots in the area. To the west is actually the town of Cramerton, and that is a commercial zoning designation of B2. So it actually touches the town of Cramerton currently. So as you can recall, the city of Belmont entered into a three-party annexation agreement just in 2017 between the town of Cramerton and the city of Gastonia. The exhibit that's provided, the map, shows that hard red line, and everything to the east of that red line is anticipated to be the city of Belmont annexation area and future city boundary. Everything to the west of that line, you can see Cramerton's in the blue, is eligible for annexation by the town of Cramerton. The subject property is in the white area there next to the blue, and therefore eligible for annexation with the town of Cramerton. So this item was heard by the Planning and Zoning Board at their September public meeting. They had quite a large dialogue about voicing their concerns about the follow-through in annexation, because this would rescind the zoning designation. They were concerned that if the applicant property owner did not follow through with annexation and zoning in Cramerton, there would be a property out there with no designation on it. However, with the conversation, it led to a recommendation of approval, and the board asked that we consult with the city attorney regarding the timing of the action, as well as they'd like to have a larger conversation regarding the ETJ area and how it's affected by the annexation agreement. With that recommendation, they did make the required findings. They thought it was a reasonable in the public interest request, as well as consistent with Goal 8 of the comprehensive land use plan, because it supports our intergovernmental relations with the town of Cramerton by honoring the three-party annexation agreement. Now, we did follow up with the city attorney, and what is brought before you is the ordinance to approve this request. The effective date would be upon annexation from the town of Cramerton. I have spoken with the town of Cramerton, and they have confirmed the property owners do have their annexation petition on file with the town of Cramerton. They are just waiting to see the outcome of City of Belmont's action. So with that, I ask that you receive the Planning and Zoning Board's recommendation to approve and any public comment and render a decision. As with all legislative actions, you will need to make the required findings that it's a reasonable request in the public interest and consistent with the goal of the comprehensive land use plan. So that completes my presentation.
Thank you,
Was the
Shelley.
vote unanimous?
Yes, it was.
It was?
Yes.
Joe, let me just ask you a question. When they found that it was in the public interest, what qualified that? How is it in the public interest?
Well, first of all, the petition was generated by the property owner, and it's in agreement with the leadership of both the town of Cramerton and City of Belmont in that it honors the annexation agreement.
Okay, so the public interest, as
City
described,
as a
are
whole.
the cities themselves and the property owner, and not the benefit of the general public.
Anybody have any other questions for Shelley?
Now, make a motion to come out of public hearing.
We have some people signed up. You have some people signed up, Mayor?
You have a sign-up sheet?
I do, I have two people signed up, yeah. Yeah, and Richard Fox and Robert Odell.
Can I let Robert Odell go first?
Sure. Hey.
Got any questions?
Who are you?
It's your.
Robert Odell,
What's your address?
125 Missouri Lane, in Holly, North Carolina.
It's your opportunity to speak to us. is
Yeah,
what
you
this is
signed up
what
to
happened.
speak.
Okay, I thought you had a question, I'm sorry.
No.
No, I don't. I'm here to answer any questions you guys have.
Yeah, how's Frankie doing?
He's doing good.
Good, okay.
Doing good.
All right, that's it then. That's all you have?
That's all I have.
All right?
Okay.
Yeah. Richard?
I'm Richard Fox. You need my address?
Yeah.
723 Hannah Woods Drive, Kramer. I work with Mr. Odell as his agent. I just want to give him a little explanation of what we were doing.
Sure.
One of the reasons we were interested in this, and Bobby discussed it, is looking at that street, that lot and the one across the street similar. But all the houses on that street are single-family homes on individual lots. And I've spoken with a lot of people who are interested in putting single-family homes on that street. And that's the whole reason for the request, is to subdivide the property to make it consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. And that's basically the intent behind what we were doing.
Right.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
All right. That being said,
Now,
Ron,
now make the motion.
got a motion to come out of public hearing, got a second, right?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let's move on to the item considering the ordinance approving request to relinquish City of Belmont zoning designation and ETJ to be annexed by the town of Cramerton. All in favor, say aye.
Is that a motion?
Need a motion
We had a
first.
motion.
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve this annexation and believe that it's consistent with our Belmont Comprehensive Land Use Plan and other adopted plans and mutual agreements for the city of Belmont, and specifically the amendment fulfills goal number 8, which is intergovernmental relations with which states to partner with surrounding jurisdictions, towns around us. So.
I'll second the motion.
Ready?
Yeah, I'll second it.
You got a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right.
Thank you. And Mayor, as part of this action,
Yeah.
building on what Shelley said, the Planning and Zoning Board had a discussion about the ETJ and is the ETJ still relevant, given that the county has updated its standards to its UDO
Yeah.
and given the changes in annexation laws. So I recommend that the council sort of direct us as staff to have that discussion with Cramerton and Gaston County, and I guess maybe Mount Holly as well, on the northern end, about the status of the ETJ. Do we need to keep it? Do we need to relinquish it? We've had it for a long time, you know, when the state laws were different, but it may be the case where it's the changes in state law now sort of have bypassed the reason for ETJ. ETJ, residents of the ETJ get caught in this trap where if they want to build a house or do anything to their property, they have to come to us for a zoning permit and then Gaston County. But what really gets tricky is when they have a code enforcement issue, and we enforce zoning ordinances both in the ETJ and city limits, but we don't enforce the code of ordinances. So junk cars, tall grass, nuisances, we only enforce those in the city limits, so we don't enforce them in the ETJ. So if you live in the ETJ and your neighbor has grass that's 2 feet tall and snakes running around, you come to us, we don't have any jurisdiction, so we refer you to the county. The county says, well, you're in Belmont's ETJ, you need to go talk to Belmont. And
Yeah.
then you come back to us frustrated, and we say, we don't have any jurisdiction, so you need to go back to the county. They get more frustrated, go to the county, and you just get in this vicious cycle. So
Circle.
so I would like for us, you know, with your approval, to start having a conversation about the status of the ETJ. Is it still relevant, still viable, still something we need to have, or is it time to maybe look at relinquishing some or all of it?
That would change the structure of our planning and zoning board.
It would.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're going to have the conversation with the town of Cramerton and other municipalities?
And the other municipalities around here,
Well, it sounds like the county needs.
and also with the
Yeah.
county.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely with the county.
I-
And this, if we wanted to relinquish the ETJ, it's a long process, and lots of interaction. Obviously, we notify the residents living in the ETJ, but just with the the change in the annexation statutes. The ETJ was created so that that's where the cities would annex, and you wanted development to be consistent with your development within the city if it's on the fringe. Well, we can't go out and
Now it's causing
annex.
problems.
Right, and so it's, I think structurally, it's a little bit antiquated, particularly for how we're operating now.
I think
So,
we need to set up a meeting with some of the municipalities.
It's not obligating us to anything, but just starting that process.
I'm not sure relinquishing it's our only option
Right,
either.
so
Yeah.
we just at least start that conversation, what our options are. Because I want to be able to give good customer service to residents of the ETJ
Sure.
and not overly burden them with our ordinances if we're not going to annex them.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, very good. Thank you, Adrian, Shelley. Next, we have public hearing on a request to allow the property on 303 Julia Avenue to divide into two parcels with lot widths less than the average width of lots within one block length or 300 feet.
I make a
Make a
motion, we go
motion.
into public hearing.
Motion?
I'll second.
Got a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are in public hearing, okay?
Okay, we need
Turn this over
to establish ground rules. Do you have a sign-up sheet for, anybody sign up for item 4?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for the audience and the public, this is a little different process that we use on this kind of petition, and it's, rather than legislative, it's a quasi-judicial proceeding. So it's subject to different rules, and it'll seem like a lot of the rules will be similar to what you would experience in a courtroom setting. You'll have parties, you have sworn witnesses, you have testimony, cross-examination. The council sits as the judge and jury and have to make required findings of fact in order for the petition to be approved or disapproved. The rules of evidence are relevant, but we don't have to abide by them strictly. And at the beginning, before we have testimony, I'll have the people on the sign-up sheet come in and take an oath in front of the city clerk. Process, when a witness appears, they'll be asked to give their testimony. The other party can cross-examine them, and then council can ask questions. That'll be the order that we follow. So with that being said, let's go ahead and call forward the petitioner, owner, applicant is Bill Falk. Hannah Melton will be giving testimony. And Brian King, is Brian, okay, you want to testify?
I just had a question about.
Okay, we can't ask questions at this level. Do you want to testify, or do you have evidence that you want to offer?
No, I just had some questions.
Okay,
about what was-
all right, maybe we can get your questions answered in the process, okay?
If you want us to take like 5 minutes and talk to them,
Okay, let's swear in the witnesses first. Mr. Hart, all three of you, put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, thank you. You just wanted to go forward. So, anybody have any questions about the process? Okay, I need to ask the council several questions before we proceed. Does any member of the council have any direct financial or pecuniary interest in the outcome of this proceeding?
No.
Okay. Do any of you have any predetermined bias or any other reason that would make you incapable of rendering a fair and impartial decision based solely on the testimony you're going to hear in the record?
No.
Okay. Mr. Hart, oh, there you are. you can go forward. Now, our practice has been to allow a narrative testimony by the planning director, so there won't be questions on her direct testimony, but there can be follow-up questions on cross-examination. Everybody good? Okay, proceed.
All right, thank you. For the record, Shelley DeHart, Planning Director for the City of Belmont and Project Planner. As read into the record, this is Conditional Use Permit 2019-01. We're asking the City Council to consider approval of a conditional use permit pursuant to Section 5.424 of the Land Development Code to allow lot widths less than the average lot widths of lots within one block length or 300 feet. Now, the intent of the applicant per the application is to allow a subdivision of the subject property into 2 lots. So on the screen and in your packets, there's an aerial photograph of the subject property. This is an older photograph. There's currently 1 single-family home on the subject property and 2 outbuildings. As you can see, it is located at the corner of Walnut and Julia Avenue. Zoning in the subject area is general residential. So Section 5.424 of the Land Development Code comes into play when somebody's proposing to subdivide a lot within a developed area or neighborhood. We call it infill development. The applicant requests to subdivide the subject property into 2 lots with lot width smaller than the average lot width of lots within 1 block length or 300 feet. Therefore, a conditional use permit is required. The average lot widths were calculated, and they're in your packet in Attachment B, and they are as follows. A block length, the average lot width is 90.7 feet. Within a 300-foot buffer area, it is 82.13. Per the ordinance, we take the larger of the 2, which therefore we take the average of 90.7. The proposed lot widths are 85 feet and a 60-foot wide lot. And it's very interesting in this case, and I'll show you on a map here. So the map on the left-hand side, it's also in your packet in Attachment A, it's a survey of the existing property. You can see the 1 existing dwelling and 2 out parcels. That existing home is 303 Julia, and it faces Julia Avenue, and the lot width is actually 163 feet wide. The applicant's proposing to subdivide it into 2 lots. You can look at the proposed subdivision survey on the right. That would leave 1 lot with an 85 lot width facing Julia, and then the applicant is proposing to move the existing house, rotate it, and have it face Walnut Street. So you can see on this second diagram, the existing home is now rotated and facing Walnut Street. Therefore, that width is the same as the original lot, and it's 60 feet in width. So with all requests, there are various required findings. One is related to the comprehensive plan and another adopted plan. So the subject property is located in the Neighborhood Conservation District, where the intent is any infill development would be consistent with the surrounding community. The proposed use is single-family residential. It's proposed to maintain 1 existing single-family detached and propose a future second detached single-family dwelling. Lot widths within that community vary from 50 feet in width all the way to 150 feet in width. Staff is of the opinion that the proposed subdivision with its lot widths and use is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. So Section 1510 of the Land Development Code outlines the process in which the City Council must follow to approve a conditional use to approve a conditional use permit. There are 3 findings that the City Council must make, and it's the burden of the applicant and its agent to help support these findings for council. So the first finding is the use meets all required principles and specifications of the code, that's the Land Development Code, and any adopted land use plans. The second is the proposed plan, if developed according to the plan submitted and approved, will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. And the last finding is the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety and will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property if located where proposed. Now, again, the burden of proof is on the applicant and the applicant's agent. The applicant has provided their statements of findings in attachment A of your report. They have also provided a document to help support the property values in the attachment in your report as well. So, City Council action, well, first of all, staff would like to enter this PowerPoint and this staff report into the record. And if council makes the required findings to approve this request, we do recommend 2 conditions be attached: that the applicant shall subdivide the subject property consistent with the preliminary plat survey attached within your staff report, and that development of the subject property shall be consistent with the Belmont Land Development Code. So with that, that concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. For the record, I neglected to mention that the petitioner is represented by Mr. John Russell as his attorney. So, Mr. Russell, you want to conduct cross now, Mr. Hart.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Hart, let me run through a few questions just for the record. If the proposal is approved, neither the use of the property as that's defined by the Land Development Code or the zoning classification is going to change. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's remain residential use and in the GR zoning classification.
That's correct.
And then any future development, whether it's of the lot where the home's going to be moved or the undeveloped lot, is still going to have to meet all requirements of the Land Development Code in terms of setbacks, lot coverage, building size, things of that nature. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that's not going to change as a result
Yes,
of
sir.
this. There's adequate water and sewer service to both lots. Is
Yes.
that true? And the lot size and the site plan allows for and provides adequate parking, so there's not going to be street parking or anything like that.
Again, that would be verified when a permit's pulled for the new home, and they'd have to meet the Land Development Code for on-site parking.
There's no request to change that or intent to change that as part of this application.
No, sir.
Okay. And then you talked a little bit about the comprehensive land use plan. The site plan which the applicants provided, which calls for continued use as single-family residential, is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan for Julia and Walnut.
That's correct.
And then, based on these answers, from a staff perspective, the proposed use in this case meets all the requirements and the principles and specifications of the Land Development Code and any other adopted land use plans. Correct?
Yes.
Right. With respect to function and compatibility, the proposed lot width compares favorably with the lot widths of the single-family homes on Walnut. Is that correct, the 60 foot?
Yes, sir. Right, adjacent to them there, so 55, 50, and 60 foot.
Can you pull that, the overhead that you have, just get the, So as you go down Walnut, so basically as to the right or moving up from the property, you have the 60-foot, which is the proposed width on the blue property. And then the next three properties are 60, 55, and 60 feet in width.
Yes, according to
That's what
GIS.
That's what you were referring to, okay. Julia Avenue has sort of a variety of homes and lot sizes, is that true? And
Yes, sir.
okay, and then the larger lots, so we've had this before in Julia Avenue, tend to skew the averages.
That's correct. There are some larger lots.
I think the 85, the proposed 85-foot width on what the property that would be undeveloped is actually larger than half of the lots, even though the average may be smaller, it's larger than half of the lots in the 300-foot radius, is that right? Let me back that up. So in Table B in the packet has the block length of all the lots, and it's actually bigger than half the lots in the block, is that right?
So,
I don't know if that's in the PowerPoint, but it's in the PowerPoint.
I can't confirm that right in a second.
All right. And then also in the packet, I'll sort of represent to you that kind of when I look at it, it looks like the 85-foot width on Julia is larger than 24 of 38. It's on the 300-foot. That sounds reasonable.
Sounds reasonable to me.
That would be Table A. What I was attempting to ask you would be Table B, where it's a much smaller table. It's just the block width.
Yes, the block width is 90.7.
Yeah. And four of the seven are actually that's in the proposal.
That is correct, based on the attachment. Yes, sir.
And that was all provided by the applicant.
That's correct, and confirmed.
City previously approved a conditional use permit at 318 and 320, Julia, last year, is that right?
Yes, sir.
We went through that, and I don't know if you remember, that was just the block down from this. This is 303, and it was across the street and block down. And the lot width and the lot size on those that approved conditional use permit would be similar to the lot, at least the 85-foot lot width on Miss Julia and lot size.
I'm sorry, I did not review that report, so.
All right. You received at least one call in support from a neighbor, is that?
Yes, I received a call from a property owner on Julia Avenue who inquired about what was going on. I explained it. He indicated that he would like to see the property cleaned up and liked what was being proposed.
He was in favor of the proposal?
He was in favor.
And that was from a neighbor on Julia? With respect to health and safety, this proposal is not going to require any additional police or fire protection as a result of
It's
this?
currently being served in that area.
And again, we talked about adequate water and sewer in the area, and getting the parking appears to be adequate and will be required by the And then just back to, you're not able to recall the specifics, but it is correct that the city did approve a similar subdivision on Julia County Lot.
Correct.
Okay. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Does council have any questions of Mr. Hart?
I have two, but go ahead.
I just have one. With all the traffic situations we've had on Julia, we did not receive any concerns then from the property owners along Julia Avenue about adding another house?
No, one aspect of this project, and thank you for bringing that up, that staff does like is that, so it currently has one driveway on the property and they're subdividing it, but they're rotating the house, so we're not getting a second driveway on Julia, it will be on Walnut. So it's not adding any other points of conflict on Julia.
So we didn't hear from any of the property owners along Julia about that part of things?
No, no one spoke to me about traffic concerns on Julia. I did have one other phone call and inquiry from someone that lived on Walnut who just asked about what the sign was for.
I have two questions. One, Mr. Russell said you received a call in support, and he said a resident, you said property owner, he said neighbor. Is this somebody who owns, is this somebody that owns property or lives on the street?
The gentleman, he did not give me his address, and I can't recall if he gave me his name, but he said he was a property owner across the street.
And then my second question would be, if the conditional use permit is approved, the owner/applicant agrees that the future development will consist of a housing type permitted under the GR zoning classification and of similar material, size, scale, and massing to the surrounding single-family homes on Juliet, Walnut, and Gaston Avenue. Would that include the stories of the house on how high it goes, or would that be something we would need to add or receive testimony on at this point?
Well, there's a lot of questions in that statement. So, first of all, it is not conditioned to be 1 or 2 stories. So, compliance with the LDC would allow a 2-story as all the other homes in the neighborhood currently. So, there was no proposed restriction on this one lot. So that would be something you could talk with the applicant or the applicant's agent about.
Okay, so at this point, it would allow?
It would allow, yes, sir.
To go
It would
over 2
allow,
stories,
yes.
unless we council acted and put that condition?
You have the ability to place conditions on this.
Okay. That's all for her?
Any other questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Hart. That's our evidence from the city. Mr. Russell, will you call
A
your...
couple of folks we want to call briefly.
Please.
All right, Bill Paul. Would you first just state your name and introduce yourself to the council?
My name is Bill Falk,
Where do you live?
101 Heritage Court, which is in Glenmere, in Belmont.
That's here in Belmont. Where do you work?
I work for the State Police Credit Union in Belmont.
And how long have you been in Belmont?
It's coming on 7 years.
You were the owner and the applicant, the current owner of 303 Julia Avenue?
Yes, sir.
Why don't you, I guess what I'd really like to do is just sort of explain your plans, why you want to do this division of the property, what you're hoping to accomplish if this is approved.
Yep. So I bought the house as a rental house. I knew it needed some work. The person who was renting it moved out. When I went to look and see what kind of work it needed to be done, it needs some foundation work, it needs an uplift, and so it made sense to, if I was going to do that much work, to go ahead and look at moving it, putting a new foundation and making it really a nice, attractive house, and at the same time gain another lot to go with it. So that's been my intention.
Okay. Just real briefly, the improvements to the existing house, the rental house, what are you planning or what are your thoughts?
So it needs a lot of work, a new foundation, it'd have a board driveway or a new driveway, new roof, some siding, then the interior needs some additional work, bathroom.
How big is the home approximately?
It's a little less than 700 square feet. So
72, I think, in the application.
it's-
And then we're talking about the driveway, your plan is to move the driveway?
I've moved the driveway to face Walnut Street. There's currently a path where someone's been driving, so roughly there.
Okay. And then all that work is something that you'll do, I guess, before you put it back in service as a rental?
Yes.
Is sort of your intent. What about the undeveloped lot, the lot that's once, if this is approved, would be vacant?
My real intention is probably to build another house that's consistent with the neighborhood and use it as a rental as well. That's my intention, to make it consistent with the area. I may end up selling the lot depending on it. I don't know.
You don't have any immediate plans?
I don't.
Construction plans or building plans for the lot?
I do not.
So I guess for the time being, it's will be vacant while we're doing the repairs and the outfit into the home.
It will be. My real intention is to move the house to make it better, to improve on it. And it just made sense.
One of the questions that came up was about the size, massing, and even number of stories on either the house that's going to be moved or the updated house or the potential house on the vacant lot. What are your thoughts on that?
So the other houses that located just a block down from Julia, the newer houses, that's kind of what my idea or plan would be, something very consistent with that, one story, somewhere around 1,500 square feet, something simple.
Okay, a little bit larger. Are those, do you know, if those are both one stories, is one of them 1.5, or do you know with the newer?
I believe the two closest ones are one story.
Okay. As far as the proposed conditions that the staff proposed, do those present any concern to you?
I'm fine with that.
Anything else that you wanted to add as far as this property or your use of it?
No, I mean, really my intention is just to make it better. You know, it's an older house that needs some work, and this would be a part of it. I think it would look really nice.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from council?
And I don't want to step out of turn if they're in disagreement with me, but would you be willing to put a restriction on 2 stories on that lot?
I have no intentions on making it at 2 stories. I wouldn't want to put any restrictions.
I'm not saying a restriction on 2 stories, but going above 2 stories, so 3.
Oh, yeah, that would be fine.
I'm okay with 2, but I don't think 3 stories fits into the size and scale of the rest of the street.
No, I'd agree. I wouldn't have an issue with that.
And I agree with you, Ryan, because I'm looking at Oak Street. We have 2 McMansions on a street there, and it does not. We can't control architectural standards, but if we can control anything with regard to the look of it, that's certainly, it's a mismatch. So I think we need to be very careful about that. We already have one property on Julia Avenue. If you drive down, and I'm an architecture freak, okay? So when I drive down Julia Avenue now, there's one house there that does not fit at all. So if we have any way to restrict so that we keep everything looking as nice as it can, I think we need to do that.
Okay.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Thank you.
We have one more witness, Wilson Melton. So this goes to the third finding that we have to present evidence on, which is the financial aspect of the project. So, Ms. Melton, would you state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Hannah Melton, and I'm a broker realtor.
Okay. Where do you live?
I live in the Catawba Heights area.
Of Mount Holly? Okay. And how are you said you're a broker realtor, is that on your own or with a company?
I started here, I moved here in 2006. I started here with Allen Tate and Belmont, and when they closed their door, I went to a smaller broker in Mount Holly with Melanie Properties, and she's been a broker in charge for the past 20 years.
Okay. And I guess so you've been actually active in this area in real estate for at least 13
Yes.
since 2006. Does part of your job include determining value on residential, on real estate in general or residential specifically? And were you asked to make that assessment of value in this case? And can I clarify that we don't have it in the PowerPoint, but the council does have a letter in the packet, is that right? That's my question. It may be the second to last page of the attachment, there are 2 pages.
Got it right here.
Page 96.
Hannah Melton, right here. L&E Properties.
So Ms. Melton, did you analyze the impact of Bill's site plan and proposal and what the financial impact would be on the adjoining property?
Yes.
Can you just briefly describe the rest of walk us through what you did and what your findings were?
Sure. So what I did was using MLS, like all brokers do, I pulled the last 365 days, last year of closings within a quarter-mile radius of 303 Julia Avenue. And the findings were, there were 19 homes closed, and I showed that what the highest and the lowest value was and how large and the smallest. So from that, from the 19 homes, per square foot ranges go from $77 to $193. So it averaged about $135, and only 2 were considered new construction. One was built in 2018 and one was built in 2019. Of the 19 homes closed, only 2 of those were new, and the rest of them were built from 1940s up. So then I did another comps. So I pulled the last 3 years of closed homes within a quarter-mile radius of 303 Julia. And the status of that is there were 39 homes closed, and I show like the average per square foot, like the highest closed price and the lowest closed price, the largest square foot, the smallest square foot. But the average, if you just take the average of per square foot, it actually came out to be very similar to what has happened in the last 1 year, which is $135 per square foot. But out of the 39 homes closed within the last 3 years, 7 were new construction. And of course, that just means that there were more lots to be had in the last 3 years than there has been in the past year. Because I work with investors, and of course, builders are always looking for infill lots so that they can build houses. So then I decided to go ahead and pull the last 3 years of closing within a quarter-mile radius of 303 Julia. And looking at just new construction, there were 7 homes closed, and the average price per square foot closed at $165, which just means that, of course, like newer homes will yield higher per square foot value. And those new homes were built from 2017 to 19.
So based on that data, were you able to form a conclusion as to whether the project here, or whether it's construction or what have you, what the impact of that is on surrounding properties?
Yes, it will not negatively impact the surrounding properties. I went ahead and tried to come up with like a couple of examples of the latest findings, and I went ahead and I did find 2 examples. In March of this year, we had 320 Juliet Avenue, number B, which sold for $181 per square foot, and that is a new infill construction. And in April of this year, there was a pre-existing house that was built in 1949, and the address of that is 503 Julia Avenue, and it closed within 30 days. It actually got multiple offers, and it sold for above asking price, and it closed at $147 per square foot. And it only had 1 bathroom, and it still needed a couple of repairs, like an electrical upgrade when it was sold. The previous tax value on that pre-existing house was $125,843, and after it was sold, there was a 61% increase.
So that's basically saying that the subdivision and the property at least contributed to the price increase. So based on that, Ms. Milton, based on your research on home sales, the impact of construction, do you have an opinion, do you think the bill's proposed plan will substantially injure adjoining property values?
Oh, no, it will help increase the value of the surrounding property.
Thank you. Thanks
And
for
also, when he's talking about improving rentals, my broker in charge, she's been doing, she's one of the very few people in this area that manages properties. And our office has right now 650 homes that we manage. These are homes and not apartments. And just improving rentals.
So capital improvement to rental property has a similar effect.
Yes, it does. And especially nowadays, millennials will pay more to have improved rental properties.
All right, thank you for coming. There may be some questions.
Does council have any questions?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Milton.
The only other thing, Mr. Wilson, that we have that did not make the packet is in our application we referenced that looking at the 320, 318, there was a significant increase in surrounding tax values.
Place that in the record.
If I could make that,
Sure.
mark that, and then pass that out about
That's fine.
our approach.
Yes. Thanks.
Yeah. You have enough?
I don't know if today's one for Mr. Miller. Oh, I did.
Is that right?
If I could have that introduced in
It's accepted.
Thank you.
Get your questions. Okay. So, Mr. King, it's not a part of the process to allow questions, but you sat there, well-behaved all from this time. So could you consult John with him real quick about his questions?
Oh, yes, sir.
Do I need to stand up?
No, just ask him and see.
Yes, so, right now, can you go back to this, the slide where
Mr.
satellite view?
King, can you address it to John, your questions rather than?
We're fine if you.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
The satellite view?
Sure.
Okay, 1 second, there you go.
So right here, this is a bus stop for a few of the students in the neighborhood. If the properties being developed, where would how would that affect the students? Where would they stand at the bus stop?
I would think that'd be a question for the Gaston County School.
School?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. My other thing is, so you're going to split the property into, the other property is going to be undeveloped. As you can see right there where the tree is, there's an RV. At one time, it was an RV park, and there were 3 RVs in the neighborhood. It was pretty loud, a lot of crazy nights there. Do you have any plans of doing that again, or?
That's not my property anyway.
I don't believe that'd be allowed under our code.
And the driveway is going to be located on Walnut. Right now, we have drainage issues there. Is that something you would address when you're developing the land? All right, that's all I have.
Thank you.
That's all, okay.
Any other questions from any of these parties? All right, you want to make a short closing statement?
Just a real short one. First of all, thank you all for hearing us. I know these take longer than some of the public hearings, and it can be frustrating to go through the findings that we have to show, but I appreciate y'all's patience and interest in the project. From a conditional use permit standpoint, I feel like our contention is we've got to show you evidence of 3 things. The code, the land development code actually favors the granting if we're able to present that. The first one's always the easiest, or often the easiest, because we're not changing the use of the property or the zoning classification. On that one, staff can almost give an opinion, and that's, I feel like they have in this case. Compatibility and from the standpoint of visually and functionally compatible with the surrounding areas, there's a lot of subjectivity in that, and so everybody can have a bit of a different opinion. But I think that in general, I would submit to you that the lot size is very consistent with, certainly with the Walnut, the adjoining properties on Walnut Street. But Julia's is tougher just because of they have a big variety of housing styles and sizes and lot sizes. But it meets all the averages, and it's larger than most, so I would contend that's met here. And what's a little bit unusual in this case is what's being presented is Bill's actually keeping the house. So it is visually compatible with what's there because it's going to stay there. So I think, I would contend to you that that's met. And then the health and safety is some of the things that you all have raised in the past, which I think are valid, is the water and sewer issue, the parking issue, and we've tried to address that here, and we always do try to put on at least some evidence where you can find that the project will not substantially decrease adjoining property values, and I think Connor did a good job with that. The only other points I wanted to make is I think this project is a good project for a number of reasons for the city. There's some additional benefits. There's benefit to the city to have some infill lots available. I think that adds to choice for the community of where if something that could be sold or bought, so that not everybody has to go out to the outlying neighborhoods. There is some infill stock available, so this helps with that. It maintains good rental housing, and that's something that we need. I would submit to you that not every new development has to be a house that's as big as can fit on a lot, and so maintaining some smaller homes in good quality that can be rented is good for the community, and that's also true of the smaller lot sizes. And having some smaller lot sizes that can be developed for rental is also good for the diversity of our housing stock. And then the fact that we've got local ownership in this particular case, that Bill lives here in Belmont, he's right here to oversee that. So those are all side benefits. I would just, again, thank you for your time. I do think that the applicants met the burden and would ask you to approve his request.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you.
For the record, I wanted to say that we are adding a condition that there be no single-family residence in excess of 2 stories allowed on this site, and the owner is agreeable to that as a condition. Okay. I think with that being said, there can be a motion to come out of public hearing.
A motion to come out of public hearing? Got a motion? Second? Second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. That brings us to consider the approval.
Okay, I can take this again, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Is our practice. Council, as a judge and jury, you'll be required to make the necessary findings. There are 3 of those, and I'll go through them one at a time. We'll vote on them separately. First one, the use meets all required principles and specifications of the code and any adopted land use plans. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Let me mention one thing. He is not related to me. We get that all the time. They ask me if I'm related to him or he's related to me. He spells his name different. He's from a different, I don't know where he's from. He's
I see everybody's hand raised. Okay. Second, the proposed plan, if developed according to the plan submitted and approved, will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. All in favor? And third, the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety and will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property if located where proposed. All in favor? Okay. Having met all the required findings now, I'll ask you, is there a motion to grant the conditional use permit as conditioned?
Do I hear a motion?
A motion that we approve it with the condition that any home built can't exceed 2 stories.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Got a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Motion carries. Thank you, Parks. All right. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing on the city's intent to permanently close an unopened 15-foot alley off Smith Street. Do I hear a motion to go into public hearing?
Motion.
I'll
Got a
second.
motion, got a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. We're now in public hearing.
I believe Alec Robinson, our senior planner, will present this.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Mayor, Council. Good evening. This is a request to close an unopened 15-foot alley located off of Smith Street between Main Street and Bryant Street. Let me go back to the first slide. The photograph shows the house on the subject property to the left. The alley is approximately where that dumpster is, and you see the Masonic Lodge building to the right, rear of the Masonic Lodge. Everybody's good on the location. This alley is not currently used and is wooded or has trees and undergrowth on it. This area was platted in 1923. At that time, around that time, service alleyways or similar narrow alleys were platted, not all around town, but in a couple of areas. And I surmised that it was possibly for garbage service or other services to the rear of the properties. The applicant is an LLC called Two Brothers through their attorney, and Two Brothers is registered to John Goodwin, who lives at 4400 Tucker Road. This action is pursuant to section 168-299 of the general statutes. After you conduct a public hearing, that you may, at your discretion, close a street or alley if no negative impacts are determined. Just so everyone is clear on the location, the Masonic Temple or Lodge is indicated in the upper part of this slide at 201 South Main Street. The alley is shown running through the center of the slide from northeast to southwest, starting at Smith Street, but ending before it comes down toward Poplar. Bryant Street is to the right, and then Poplar is to the left, with South Main at the top and Smith on where the property frontage is. Per the statute, we posted signs in the vicinity. A legal ad has run in the Gazette for 4 weeks, and notification letters were mailed by the city and by the applicant's attorney to adjacent property owners. If you choose to approve the alley closing, half the width, in other words 7.5 feet, will be annexed onto the property owner on either side through an internal action at the Register of Deeds. This will occur automatically per the statute if you approve it, and the county, the various county offices will be apprised of this action. So this action is outside really zoning. It is an unzoned alley, it's an unopened alley. It's something that y'all have the ability to do through the statute, so it's our recommendation that you have this hearing and hear any public comment, and then consider and deliberate and vote on this item. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Just out of curiosity, I know it's not used today, but why the need to just go ahead and close it?
I would prefer that the applicant's attorney go into the matter of why they're asking it. Our position is more or less neutral. This is something that they can request and have, and you're here to hear it. So if you don't mind, defer to their attorney.
We'll do.
Okay. John Russell is here tonight representing Two Brothers LLC.
Is Mr. Goodwin here tonight?
Sir, and John and Rebecca are in the back row.
Okay. All right.
If no questions from me, I'll stand by.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I'll be much briefer, I hope, here. So let me just give you a quick overview and then try to address Councilman Gadd's question of why we're here. And I'll try to do that as succinctly as I can. So as Alex said, the alley's not being used right now. He did some research about the aerial photographs. It appears it hasn't been in use for about 40 years. Half of it, when you walk it, is sort of overgrown. You can't even tell that there's an alley there. Sure.
1 second, please. I'll get you a diagram back up. Is that the one you prefer?
And there's really no practical use because, as you can see from the width, there's no turnaround options. It doesn't go all the way through to Poplar Street. So if you were to have a garbage collection or emergency or vehicle, you can't get turned around in there. You get in the alley and you get stuck. One of the things that I think is in your packet that's really interesting is we went back and got the original map for the Smith estate that goes all the way back to 1923. I was talking with Mr. Wilson, I think he was drawing this plat up when he first started practicing law. But they actually, the intent was to go all the way to Poplar Street, and for whatever reason, it didn't do that. And so just as the property developed and as it brought in, the alley closed out, and there's just, I think that, or I would assume that that's one of the reasons it's never been used, is there's just no practical effect. So the other thing that's interesting about this is that you will see John and Rebecca's lot is technically a non-conforming lot because they have two houses on the lot. They have 8 Smith Street and 118 Bryant. And those houses were built in 1940 and 1953, so long before the adoption of the Land Development Code. The Land Development Code does not allow you to put 2 houses on the same lot anymore. So it has been a non-conforming lot since the Land Development Code was established. And what we're trying to do is to divide that lot so that each house will have its own lot. And so one of the benefits of doing this is it will eliminate a non-conforming use or a non-conformity. One of the goals with non-conformities in land development codes is that while they're grandfathered in and they can exist in their present state, that over time those non-conformities will be eliminated through development or planning. And so this is one opportunity. So there's a benefit to just the consistency and the land development code to do that. So how we got here is a little bit, Mr. Gadd, in response to your question, is somewhat technical. We've been working on this since February, and staff, Mr. Hart and Alec have been great, Alec and Shelley, to work with, and sort of gone back and forth with a number of different options. But the main idea was to try to subdivide so that the 8 Smith Street and 118 Bryant, they're designed as rental houses. I believe their intent is to remain as rental houses. But whether you're trying to get lending on a home to repurpose them or you're doing a lease, it's always better to have just one lot and one house so that you can describe the boundaries of where your tenants can go and can't go for the purpose of, like I said, or if they were ever to be sold, you'd really want these properties divided. So that's sort of the bigger and overarching purpose of doing that. There is enough. Here's the issue we ran into. Under Chapter 4 of the Land Development Code, everything is fine to subdivide except the challenge has been meeting the 55-foot minimum lot width. There's 125 feet along Smith Street, so there's plenty of room to divide it, but there's not 55 feet from the current boundary of the alley to 118. It just barely goes all the way to 118. And so we had a survey done that divided the lot, and I'll show it to you if I can, but we ran into this issue. The county building inspector wouldn't approve it because you can't situate a lot line within 3 feet of a home unless that home has a 2 or 4 hour fire protection wall. Right. So basically, the only way you can do that is if you're building condos or townhomes, and so those homes are built without windows and with a certain type of insulation and building material, so it's called a 2 hour fire protection wall, which I couldn't tell you the specifics other than you can't put the lot line there. So we didn't have 55 feet, and we went back to Shelley and Alec and said, one option we have is trying to go the variance route and just have a smaller lot. And we could do 47.5 feet because we can do that and that would not be a problem. The other option we could do is try to close the alley, and that would give you the 55 foot. And the impression we got in working with them is that they would prefer trying to close the alley. That maintains the consistency of the land development code and still have the 55 foot width. But of course that would require the public hearing. And then, they did want us to talk to the tax department to make sure that if this were approved, that the tax department mechanism would automatically give everyone the additional 7.5 feet. We did do that. They asked us to send a letter to the neighbors, just advising them what we were doing and why, and to offer to have questions. We did do that. I understood from Alec that one person did call into the city in response to that letter, and that was favorable, and they, or at least didn't object. And so said, that's fine, everything looks good. So we sent that out in addition to the usual mechanisms of advertising and posting signs. We went the additional step of contacting the neighbors. So that's our presentation, that's the background. Certainly be happy to take any questions.
I have one question.
Sure.
Just if we close that alley, we're talking about affecting other property owners other than the applicants here, is that correct? And all of them are aware of that?
That's correct. So that's why Alec asked us to send the letter. So we've done that, plus it's been advertised and the signs have been posted. So, and I don't know, I don't think that the additional 7.5 feet in the back is going to have any significant impact on tax.
No, I just didn't want anybody to be surprised. I want to make sure that all the information is out
They
there.
are aware, and I believe the letter included a copy of the statute, so that when I sent it out to them, it referenced the statute and explained that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to come up and say just anything about your position? This is John Goodwin.
You put me on the spot. John Goodwin, property owner, partner of two brothers, which my wife has told me should not have been called two brothers because she's a partner as well. So mistake made there. Honestly, when I bought the property, I wasn't even aware that there was an alleyway there. I probably should have. And regardless of the subdivision or not, I guess I'd see this as a benefit to all the owners. If the alleyway can't be used, it hasn't been used, it seems like it benefits everybody. So, one way or the other, it sounds great for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one question of Adrian, just for the record. We're not able to sell this property?
Correct. It's right of way.
Okay, so just wanted to mention that we can't sell it because it's right away.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Do I hear a motion to come out of public hearing?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
That brings us to the consideration of the ordinance to permanently close an unopened 15-foot alley off Smith Street.
I make a motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve, got a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. John, you up for the next one too? We'll put you a tent or a camper or something. Next item is item number 8. Consider the approval of an interlocal agreement regarding regional sewer interconnect between the City of Belmont and the City of Charlotte.
Thank you, Mayor. I will give an overview of this item and then turn it over to Ron Hargrove, who is the Deputy Director of Charlotte Water, and Jerry Hatton, our City Engineer, to answer the technical questions that you may have of how we got here and any of the details in this interlocal agreement. We've been discussing this for many years, and just give a brief background for those of you that haven't been following this issue since at least 2008 or 9 or 10. Several years ago, the federal government had new regulations limiting the amount of nutrients, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus, that can be discharged into the Catawba River, more stringent regulations to help clean up the river. We have been working with DENR, which is now Department of Environmental Quality at the state, on how Belmont can comply with these ordinances, since we do have a wastewater treatment plant that discharges into the Catawba River. Our current wastewater treatment plant, as you know, was sized for our industrial past, and we're currently operating at about 35% capacity. It's a 5 million gallon a day plant capacity, and we're about 1.7 million gallons a day treated. So we have these high fixed costs for our plant. We're not utilizing it to its full capacity or even half capacity because of our changing water usage in Belmont. And so when we were looking at how Belmont could comply with these new environmental regulations on the discharge, one of the items that we looked at was upgrading our existing plant. Based on our estimates at the time, that was too expensive to do. So then we looked at partnering with other agencies. We looked at Gastonia and looked at Charlotte. So that is background. Through the years, we've worked out an agreement, memorandum of agreement with City of Charlotte through its utilities department, and separately but related to this, the City of Mount Holly has also worked out an agreement with Charlotte Water for the exact same project. They had the same concerns, nutrient discharge regulations. Mount Holly was in a little bit different situation in that due to their growth, they were closer to capacity on their wastewater treatment plant. They were going to need to make expansions for capacity purposes for their treatment plant, which we were not in that shape. So their issue was twofold, both environmental regulation compliance as well as meeting state requirements for capacity. Ours was more on the environmental side because we had plenty of capacity. But you can see on this map, which is included, I pulled this from Charlotte Water's website, but it's also on the fact sheet about the project. The larger picture is on the northern end of the river with Mount Holly. You can see their wastewater treatment plant. You can see the Whitewater Center. It's kind of a good frame of reference. And in green, you see the proposed Stowe Regional, I forget what WRRF means, but it's a new word for wastewater treatment. The water reclamation.
Resource recovery.
Yes, it's that. So that's on the northern side. The smaller picture to the right is our project. So you see the Belmont wastewater treatment plant on the western side of the river. It would be a dual force mains, one force main for use, one for redundancy purposes, to be built underneath the Catawba River at Charlotte Water's expense. That would take our wastewater under the river and into Charlotte to the Paul Creek pump station, and then ultimately to that new Stowe Regional WRRF. So the agreement that we've reached, I'll get to the details in just a moment, but just to give you a little more background on the timeline and the areas where the City Council, this City Council and previous City Councils have had to make decisions about this. The City Council in Belmont in 2011 unanimously approved a memorandum of agreement with the City of Charlotte that we would both work together on this regionalization project. As I mentioned, Mount Holly and Charlotte also had a memorandum of agreement about that same time. In 2013, City of Charlotte purchased property on the south side of the Clarion property, just north of the Whitewater Center, and that's the location for the new Stowe Regional facility that we just discussed. At the same time, in 2013, Charlotte also purchased nutrient allocation from Clarion. And the Belmont City Council unanimously approved an agreement with Charlotte that Belmont would purchase that nutrient allocation from Clarion, now owned by Charlotte, for approximately a little over $5.8 million. And would be able to use that nutrient allocation if Charlotte did not build the new wastewater resource reclamation facility. And so if Charlotte doesn't do what it says it's going to do by building this new facility for whatever reason, then Belmont, instead of having to spend a lot of money to upgrade its plant, would have a higher nutrient allocation through that purchase of that $5.8 million. As it turns out, Charlotte is proceeding with building its new situation, so this was kind of a hedge of that, which we don't need to do, so we never executed, where we had to purchase their nutrient allocation. Fast forward a few years as we're working through some of the details and the environmental regulations and the environmental work that you have to do the planning on this. In January of 2016, the City of Charlotte Water staff from the City of Charlotte presented an update, one of several updates that they had presented up to then to the City Council at your planning retreat in January that just happened to be held at the Whitewater Center. And then, if you'll recall, in February of 2018, we had a City Council special workshop to focus on water and sewer issues. This was the first item on that agenda, where our City Engineer, Jerry Hatton, updated you on the project, as well as a nutrient allocation transfer from Charlotte to Belmont and Mount Holly. And what that nutrient allocation transfer did was sort of buy time for both Belmont and Mount Holly to remain in compliance with these environmental regulations until the new plant was built. And then at the time the new plant in Charlotte is built, Belmont and Mount Holly would then transfer those nutrient allocations back to the City of Charlotte. So again, sort of just hedging until this project is completed. So Jerry gave an update in February of 18. In April of 18, the City Council unanimously approved that nutrient allocation transfer with Charlotte. And then we continue to work, Belmont staff and Charlotte staff, on this agreement, which brings us to tonight. In September this year, the Water and Sewer Committee met to discuss this project and unanimously recommended approval of this interlocal agreement.
Can you remind me who's on that committee?
So that is Mayor Martin and Councilman Folk and Councilman Gadd on the Water and Sewer Committee. The agreement, it covers, all the bases of Charlotte's obligations, of Belmont's obligations for this project. But I wanted to kind of get a little bit into the weeds on the cost of the project, the cost of not doing the project. Interlocal agreements don't require public hearings, but we've done this in Water and Sewer Committees meetings, at City Council meetings, at City Council retreats for the past 10 years. So we haven't had a whole lot of public participation in these processes other than people coming to the meetings. It's not that we're hiding anything, it's just that there's not a public hearing required for this. When we put the agenda packet on the website last week, I believe it was last week, we did get one question on our Facebook page where we posted the agenda materials, and someone was asking about the cost of doing this, particularly concerning how we were paying for it versus how Mount Holly decided to pay for it. And I'll get to that in just a minute. But as you'll see in the agreement, the cost estimate for this project is $9.3 million for us, and that is the cost of converting the existing wastewater treatment plant into basically a large pump station. And then we would then deed that over to the City of Charlotte. They would install the two force mains connecting our wastewater treatment plant, which will become a pump station, under the river into Charlotte. So our cost is just to convert the wastewater treatment plant into a pump station. And then we have some minor costs of abandoning some of the other things so that it can't discharge into the Catawba River. So when we were looking previously at what it would cost if we did not partner with Charlotte on this and just upgrade our existing wastewater treatment plant, we estimated that at $12 million. You adjust it for inflation over the years, and that puts you at about $14.3 million to make upgrades to meet the nutrient allocation requirements. And then if we wanted to build a brand new wastewater treatment plant that would be state-of-the-art and could handle our capacity and handle all the environmental regulations, that's probably $40 to $50 million and potentially more, particularly as new regulations come down from Washington or Raleigh, looking at additional higher treatment standards that may come down. Usually those standards aren't relaxed, they're increased over time. So clearly partnering with Charlotte is the cheapest upfront capital cost for the City of Belmont. And if you look through the interlocal agreement, you'll see that since Charlotte will be treating our wastewater, our responsibility will be to get wastewater from the user to the pump stations down to the new large pump station, which was previously the wastewater treatment plant. Right. Once it hits those basins, it's Charlotte's to treat. And so Charlotte will charge the City of Belmont it's basically its cost of treatment, which they call their operation and maintenance cost. and there's a schedule for how that is derived. But the city of Belmont City Council will still set our water rates and still set our sewer rates. And then just by comparison, Ron and his staff were good to provide us with the current O&M rate for Charlotte. And for Charlotte, it costs them $1.19 to treat 1,000 gallons of wastewater. So I looked at how they came up with that, applied that to what it costs us to do that. It costs us $2.93 to treat 1,000 gallons of wastewater. So Charlotte can do it at about a 60% discount over what we can do. Charlotte estimates that their O&M costs will increase about 5% a year, which is consistent with what it would cost us. So just because of their economy of scale, they can do things a lot cheaper than we can, because again, we have a really high fixed cost with our system, because we're operating at 35% capacity. So the question was, how is this going to affect our sewer rates? Are we going to have to raise our rates? Or are we going to have to create new fees to pay for this? So for those of you that have been on council, you'll remember in about 2010, 2011, we did a utility rate study, because what we found was our utility rates were modeled on our industrial usage, which was going away, had gone away, and we had transferred more to a residential customer base, which doesn't use nearly as much water. And we had an aging system, and we had a lot of capital needs at the time, and we didn't have a way to pay for it. So that study recommended that the City Council approve some increases to the water and sewer rates over the next several years to pay for this deferred maintenance and to upgrade our system and to plan for future expansion, future upgrades of the utility system. So we've reviewed that periodically, but the Charlotte Water Connection Project was included in the rate study. So this is one of the projects that we said, we know this is coming, we don't know exactly when, but we need to have a way to pay for it so it's not a huge shock to our ratepayers when the time comes. That rate study was implemented, and we had some pretty steep rate increases at the beginning. Those have tapered off over the last 3 years. In the budgets, you approved rate increases of 0.5%, 3 years ago, 1% a year ago, and no increase this year. So the utility rate study has worked, and we're now on a solid footing in our utility fund and have been able to afford to do these upgrades for the last several years, but also planning for this project. So we wanted to know, what percentage of our bills are covered by, or would go toward the debt service for this project. So our billing staff pulled our average residential user, which uses about 4,400 gallons a month. And that's the sewer only charge for that average residential customer is $38.87 per month. So city engineer calculated the debt service on the $9.3 million loan for the project. And when we close on that loan in a few years, of that $38.87 monthly sewer bill, $3.92 of that will go toward this project. So it's included in your bill. Because we will be paying down that principal each year, at the end of the 20-year loan, that portion of your monthly bill will go down to $1.33. So all of that is to say, this project is already baked into our rate structure. We would not need to increase sewer rates to go with this project. However, I mentioned if we choose not to go with Charlotte for wastewater treatment, our costs will go either $5 or $6 million more, or multiples of tens of millions of dollars more. None of that is included in the rate study, so we would need to raise our sewer rates to pay for that additional cost. So just in summary, we would save between $5 and $40 million conservatively in capital costs by approving the interlocal agreement with Charlotte. Would save 59% on our operation and maintenance cost by partnering with Charlotte over what we can treat water for. And the City Council will set its own water and sewer rates, but the Charlotte project does not require a rate increase due to the fact that it can just treat wastewater treatment. It can treat wastewater much more efficiently and cheaply than we can. Sure. So that's just a summary of how we got here and the cost of this. There are other benefits to which I'm sure Ron and Jerry can get into in terms of environmental quality for the river. You're removing discharge points from Mount Holly and Belmont. Charlotte will have a brand new state-of-the-art treatment system that can treat water much better than what either Mount Holly or Belmont can do. So it is better for water quality. And then I will briefly touch on how Mount Holly chose to do this, because that was brought up online, that we hope our rates don't go up like Mount Holly. So I told you how we chose to kind of set the stage to pay for these projects. Apparently Mount Holly chose a different course of action for that, and which I assume was in the best interest of Mount Holly at the time, but they were not saving up money. They weren't setting their rates to be able to handle this project. So now they have increased their water and sewer rates, and they've added new fees to their utility bills this year to help set aside money to help pay for this. We will pay for this through a low-interest loan from the state of North Carolina with this revolving loan program for utilities, and then, of course, we'd have the debt service payments, again, for 20 years on that. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of how we got here. It's been a lot of work on both sides of the river. We appreciate working with Charlotte on this and working with Mount Holly as well, and Clarion. It's been a lot of work, but I would turn it over to the experts to answer any questions on the technical side of the interlocal agreement.
Could I make a comment? I know it's hard to get excited about wastewater treatment, but this is exciting because we've talked about it for so many years. I've talked about what we're sending to Charlotte, which is not appropriate for me to say, but the other thing that's quite interesting is I've been excited about this, but I didn't know the Stone name was going to get attached to it as well. But I'm really excited to see this finally happening, and it does show how well we've been planning with regard to all this and our manager's leadership as well, so thank you.
Well, and certainly more staff than me and previous staff. Barry was very involved in this.
It's good. All right. Anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, Adrian, so what we've got is a $5 million spread between upgrading and going with the city of Charlotte, essentially. Is that right? 14.3 versus 9.3?
Yes.
We're currently functioning at 35% capacity. Does that indicate we've got 65% of unused capacity that we could access?
It's not quite, theoretically, yes, but once you hit a certain percentage, I believe it's 80 to 85%, then you have to go to the state and expand your treatment capacity.
Okay.
But we could easily double our capacity.
So we would have capacity for years to come if we did that?
Yes.
Okay. This agreement, did I say this is a 99-year agreement?
It's a perpetual agreement, but it says that if a court finds that perpetual is not a realistic time, then 99 years is a more realistic time.
Okay. As you said, the state is getting very prohibitive on its nutrient allocations. Once we surrender our nutrient allocations, the prospects to get one in the future, should we decide to go back into business, are slim and none.
We would not have a need to get them in the future.
Okay. Once we surrender our nutrient allocation, do I understand correctly that the Long Creek facility, will that, can they open without our nutrient allocation? Because I think I've heard in the past that without us surrendering our nutrient allocation to this project, the plant cannot open, cannot be sanctioned to open. Is that correct?
As part of permitting process, Ron Hartner, Charlotte Water, thank you for having me.
Come on up.
And I echo your sentiments. It's been a long time coming.
Yes,
I
it
haven't
has.
been a part of that either, but we're certainly glad to be here at the table with you and to work out a partnership. To answer your question, the permitting process kind of dictates how the allocations roll. We didn't have an allocation because we didn't have a discharge into Lake Wylie like the city and Mount Holly did. So we bought 90% of Clarion's permit. So we had poundage for nitrogen and phosphorus to trade with Belmont and Mount Holly until we get the plant built. And so what we've set up through work with Jerry and Mount Holly's staff and the state is to trade portions of our allocation with you at Mount Holly so that you don't exceed your nitrogen and phosphorus limits on your discharge until that time. The agreement then transfers that back to Charlotte in total, once we get the plant built, and then you cease your operation. We could build the plant without Belmont or Mount Holly. We couldn't build it without both of them. So the less poundage we have, the higher the treatment process and the lower the limits we've got to meet are.
So the answer is yes. I mean, you have to have our nutrient allocation to open.
To have your
So you have to
nutrient
have both.
allocation gives us a better target on our discharge limits.
You're gonna have more efficiencies.
Did you say you had to have both Mount Holly and Belmont, or just one?
We have to have one. We don't have to have both. All the poundage in the initial phase of the plant, it exceeds what it's called the total maximum daily limit, the limit that the lake can handle. Both the poundage, all the poundages together exceed that amount for the initial 15 MGD. So we can't even take advantage of all that poundage. When it gets expanded in the future, that's when that comes into play. So not having one of the towns to participate limits the future growth and the expansion capabilities is really the answer.
Adrian, I don't want to, if there's more of a presentation before questions, I hold mine off, but if there's not, Martha and Charlie and I have been on this since the front end. It makes economic sense.
Yes, it does.
I mean, it's going to save us money. Right now, you're talking maybe 14 million. What if they come down with different standards? Then we have to upgrade our plant by 5 million, 5 million, 5 million, and then you say, well, we're just going to have to build another one for 40 million. Charlotte is going to pay to put 2 pipes underneath the Catawba River. We don't.
Yeah.
They're going to pay the electric bill on that pump, that motor running 24 hours a day, and I guess that's $200,000 or $300,000 a year.
That'll save us a lot.
And then the other thing that I think is great about it is that you're going to have a state-of-the-art facility that if the federal government comes down with other kind of allocations that you have to meet, you guys are going to meet that. And the other thing is the environmental impact of it. So I think it's, as far as I'm concerned, and then our customers are not going to pay any more money, and we're also going to have flexibility in there to pay the debt service plus do capital improvements in our system at the same rate. So I think, and if I understand right, the 9.3 has a 30% contingency rate in it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Does it have that much in it, contingency?
Yes, sir. So part of the 9.3 million is contingency, 30% contingency.
About 30%. So if you take the 30% off the 9 million, then to me, you know, and I think it, to me, I don't know how you could turn this thing where it's not a good deal for us. I mean, I really don't.
So let me ask you, Ron had initially asked you, he was going to hold his questions if there was a presentation. Is there a presentation? Because that was a whole lot of questions and statements.
I don't have a presentation to
Okay.
provide you other than what you've seen.
Okay, so that was the answer to the initial question then?
Yeah, I just have a curious question. How long will it take to run the pipes under the river?
We've selected a team to build the Mount Holly facilities, and the first kind of component is the pipeline project.
Right.
And they're going to bore 2 deep shafts, and then they will bore under the river and pull pipe. They'll bore from the Mecklenburg side to the Gaston side, and then pull the pipe back. And I understand they will be complete with that in about 30 days.
Wow.
2
That's
bores.
fast.
I'd like to hear our engineers' take on this. Do you think this is a good deal, Jerry?
Well, yes, I do. And despite the fact that Adrian gave you all that history, I was a little bit more.
Jerry's been at this a lot longer than I have.
I'm gonna set a
Way back
time
in-
limit on you, Jerry, now.
Way back in 2002, we understood that there was a need to check out our wastewater plant and see how we were going to be able to grow. And at that time, we started with the city of Mount Holly and said, hey, let's get together. And then we included Cramerton, ran the wastewater treatment plant at the time. Gastonia asked to be involved, Gaston County. And then Charlotte Mecklenburg Utilities came over and asked if they could. So we completed a study in 2002. We didn't reach any real conclusions as to where, but we had 4 different sites. Build a plant in Mount Holly and us pump up to them. Expand our plant.
Charlotte Mecklenburg had property on the other side of the river to the south of our plant. We thought that, they don't plan to use it. And we had various locations, and one was the Long Creek area. So we looked at a lot of different alternatives, and all those alternatives kept coming up with a wastewater treatment plant cost of around $90 million back then. And we thought the only way we could handle that for all the communities and the changing in the discharge limits and so on was to come up with an agreement, and that's what we did. I believe we got a very good deal from Charlotte Water. The way they're going to charge us based on their operational costs, correct me if I'm wrong, but they take all of their operational costs for all their treatment plants and major facilities like the pump stations, and they put that together, divided by the number of gallons they treat, and that's how they come up with that rate that Dana showed you before. So
But then that's just paying for sustaining. So what
Yes.
about reinvestment? How do they create capital to reinvest in the facilities?
We have a robust CIP, capital improvement plan, and kind of that financial modeling that I think Adrian was speaking to about how we project out capital needs in the future and our revenues and our rates, which the Belmont O&M charge for the sewer bill would be a revenue stream for us. All that gets rolled in together in our financial model to support how much capital investment we can produce throughout the years. We have about a 10-year forecast on what that is as far as capital needs, as well as what our revenue requirements.
So you build that in your O&M?
We do.
Okay.
We do.
And Charlotte spent significant amounts of money meeting stricter discharge limits than we've ever had to. And a lot of their plants, like a couple that are relatively new, less than 20 years old, they're all operating to meet those limits.
Joey, let me ask you a question. I mean, I saw in here that we looked at going with Cramerton at some point. When did we look at that? Was that back?
That was back in this period also.
2002?
Yeah. And we looked at several options there. We have pump stations on the west side of the city that we thought we could build new force mains and direct them over to the Cramerton plant. The Cramerton plant at the time was an industrial plant, and they did not have the money to put into that plant to upgrade it to meet the stricter discharge limits. And of course, they're on the South Fork River, which means they actually have even more strict requirements over there because there just isn't the volume of water like in we looked at that, we talked to them about it. We did in fact eliminate one pump station that's just across the street from that wastewater plant. Takes care of the Eagle Park development, and worked out an agreement with them at that time that eliminated the need for a pump station in Eagle Park, so we got rid of one instead of adding one more. And we've been working with them, paying their rates, and again, Two Rivers rates are less than our rates because they have the size to work in stuff.
Okay, so I mean, what I'm getting at is what you're talking about was the work you did in 2002. I mean, since then, right now, Cramerton has gone with Two Rivers with Gastonia. So when we're talking about, and we've talked a lot about regionality, why have we looked in current terms, not 2002, in 2019, what it would be to attach onto their system? Is that feasible? Because, you know, and admittedly, I don't know. It seems like it would be easier to tap into their system than bore under a river. And I don't know if it's more cost effective or not.
Boring under a river can be expensive, but it's the shorter distance, I think. And once it gets over on the Charlotte side, they have the option. So we essentially
pumping over to the Fall Creek Pump Station, which currently can pump to several different treatment plants and options. They can balance out their loads and everything on those plants. Cramerton's plant, I don't believe, has sufficient capacity, and I think there would have to be major improvements there in order for us to take all of our flow there.
So we think that, but we don't know that.
Well, we know it from years past. I can't say if that's true when we started down this path in 2010.
So, I mean, if I'm hearing you right, it's a shorter distance to go under the river, but we don't necessarily know if it's cheaper, because you just said it can be really expensive.
Our partners here have agreed to pay for that as long as we pay for all these facilities.
Well, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I mean, I know that you guys, particularly down on the left end here, have been working with this for quite a while.
Yeah, we have.
My concerns in a nutshell are this. I mean, we could go ahead, we've got capacity, and we can sustain ourselves for some time. We're looking at a $5 million spread to go ahead and be somewhat self-sufficient, self-determining. So what I'm concerned about is once we surrender our nutrient allocation, we'll never get it back. The state probably won't give us a new nutrient allocation. So, well, if we can just string a few sentences together and complete my thought.
Excuse me, I didn't realize you weren't finished.
We will be, right now we control our water and sewer. I guess long-term, and I know we're locked into some rates for some time, but 99 years or perpetuity, at some point we are going to be, and I don't want to use the term at the mercy of, but we will be subject to whatever rates Charlotte comes up with. So we won't be determining our rates. You're saying we will be determining our sewer rates, but they're going to have to be based on what Charlotte is charging us, and then we're going to have to calculate our rates based on that fee. So that's kind of where I am, and I'm trying to resolve that. I mean, I understand that there's an economy of scale, and it's good on the surface, but I guess I'm just wondering, are there any underlying elements, long-term, that might come back to bite us?
Well, a couple of times a year, I do an analysis of what our wastewater needs are, because we're going to do that with any time we have to do subdivision in and things of that nature. And quite frankly, Belmont is limited in the boundaries. We can't expand a whole lot. Now maybe every house in Belmont can be torn down, we can put up high rises, things like that. That might be a different story, but you know, as under our current growth patterns, I think, you know, the amount that we're being allocated through this agreement is sufficient to keep us there. I don't, I can't argue with you that having control sounds nice, but I think we could talk to several of Charlotte Water's current partners, even in other counties, and we can ask them how they feel about it, and I'm sure they're going to say the best thing we ever did was to get out of the wastewater treatment business. The point is, we've been, for the last several years, we've been operating under our old discharge permit. The state has not renewed it, because they knew when they renewed it, they would throw a lot of these new limits at us that we haven't had before. Then we'd have to put together a program of how we were going to comply with those limits. And at this plant down here, it's a good old plant, and it's held up well, but you're talking new facilities for new treatment processes that just aren't there, and you can't just dump them into that site.
And I apologize for interrupting, but
No, that's okay.
we've been researching this for over about 10 years, and I'm excited about it, and I'm not going to have anybody have me not be excited about it, because this is the direction we need to go. My question is, are we ready to take a vote, or where are we as far as to making a motion? Because I think we've discussed it for, as I said, a number of years.
So the Water and Sewer Committee got into the weeds of the agreement, and
studied it.
they asked for some additional information about the cost of agreeing to this interlocal agreement with Charlotte. What does that mean for the O&M costs, for the capital costs, potentially for rates? what is not approving it and staying independent, what are those costs? So they said that they are comfortable with the agreement. They unanimously recommended approval of the interlocal agreement. I provided you with the cost of executing this agreement with Charlotte and continuing down the path that we've been on for the last 10 years. Also the cost of not approving this agreement, remaining independent. There's probably additional cost in here of that I haven't calculated. I mean, we've had an agreement with the City of Charlotte for 10 years to work with them on it.
Yeah.
If we don't honor that agreement, there's probably some costs that Charlotte has spent in good faith, assuming that we would act in good faith with them, that they probably would want to recoup some of that cost. There's the unknown of future environmental regulations. I mean, the Catawba River's in better shape than it's been in a long time, but it's still not a beautiful river. So I'm sure it could use some additional regulations to help clean it up. So each time that the federal government or state government has new regulations, we would have to upgrade our plan to meet those. And I do understand your concern that you expressed tonight and in previous meetings about giving up control. And once you give it up, you don't get it back. I mean, we're not getting it back.
No matter where.
As city manager, I would say that owning and operating a wastewater treatment plant is not all it's cracked up to be. And if there's something that we can get rid of and get rid of the maintenance headaches that wastewater treatment plant has, the environmental liability that it poses. I mean, our staff does a great job with it, and when there's ever any little incident, I mean, we're Johnny on the spot with it. But when you have equalization basins that could hold 5 million gallons of wastewater, and it's that close to the river, there's always a chance something could happen.
Absolutely.
So this is, I think it's a good opportunity for us to partner with some of our neighbors. It will save money for our ratepayers. It will save the city money, and it's better for the river because Charlotte will be able to treat wastewater at a much higher level than what we can.
Well, is Chuck here tonight? Is he?
No, sir.
He's not?
He's not. But he's been involved in all of this. And
You've
he's on the
discussed
same
this
page
with
us.
staff, and I'm sure that your staff is all in favor of it too.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And Chuck and all the folk. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think the math over the 20 years is pretty straightforward. And then when you have the debt falling off, it really cleans up that next 20 years. And so there will always be that unknown that probably
That's right.
my kids won't even get to clarify. And then for me, the unknown of federal regulation and upgrades is scarier than the unknown of working with Charlotte. And so for that reason, and kind of looking at, whenever you have some unknowns out there, you have to look at the collective wisdom of multiple city councils over the last 15 years, not only in Belmont, but Mount Holly, multiple city managers. And it seems like collectively that wisdom's brought us here to this recommendation. And so for that reason, I'd make a motion to go ahead and approve.
I second it.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. And I appreciate you coming over here. Thank you. Appreciate it. To do that. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is a facade enhancement grant, 421 Catawba Street.
Our downtown director will present this.
Oh, I will?
Yes.
Mayor, council, city manager, thank you. We actually have two applications before us, and the applicant, Mr. Mike Kimmett, is with us tonight. And before I get into the slide, I want to preface the presentation, kind of going back to our CIP budget under the community enhancement section. Priority number 4 is the River District Catawba Street streetscape improvement, where we have we're projecting funding in the very near future, starting in fiscal year 2021, to improve streetscape improvements to enhance Catawba Street. In order to get there, some things are going to have to happen, which is what we've been working on for quite a while, being that the metal canopy covering the sidewalks will all have to be removed. So in my communication and establishing relationships with some of the property owners, Mike and his partners have stepped up and applied for 2 facade grants for 2 of the properties there, which they actually own multiple now. And so we feel like this is kind of phase 1 of many projects to get us to our end result of actually getting to the point where we can spend some street enhancement money to really improve the overall look of the River District. So when I first came to Belmont, and I immediately recognized downtown as being a tremendous, beautiful downtown, and then when I drove through the River District, it reminded me of a community that I had previously worked with back in Louisiana, where they had a traditional square, beautiful courthouse in the middle, and then each 4 blocks surrounding the courthouse was plastered with the same monotone metal slipcover and canopy. And so you can see this reminded me very much of the River District, and knowing what we accomplished here, I immediately knew what could happen over in the River District by removing the metal slipcovers and bringing back the identity of each of the individual buildings. And so to me, this would be a great project to happen in the River District, which brings
One thing I would like to say, I never had thought of it being a metal slip cover.
and now I'm not.
It's certainly appropriate, I just never had thought of the term.
So the buildings that have applied for the facade grant are 421 and 423. These do not have metal slip covers across the facade, so we do know the brick is there, but the metal awning needs to be removed to actually move forward with the project. So I'm kind of going to go through the visual presentation, and then I'll kind of talk about the scope of each one. So we do have an application for 421, which is currently the old Banderas property. She has closed her store, and then on 423 is Jerry Lynn's consignment. And so on 421, the proposed scope, over the years, at some point, a faux facade was built out of aluminum or vinyl siding. And so the scope of 421 is to, of course, first will be remove the metal canopy covering the sidewalk, and then the faux facade will be removed, exposing there is, I guess, a primary facade, which is a recessed facade, and I'm assuming this was done in the 80s, no windows were put in, just the door, and so the scope includes to cut in a large plate window on the right side of the facade, of this secondary facade, which will become the primary facade. And on the left side, it cannot have, because there's a bathroom right behind that wall, so cannot cut a window into that. So doing a little rendering here by removing the metal canopy, removing the facade, which will have a plate window only on the right, and putting up a cloth awning will bring us to a similar look that we have here. 420, can I go ahead and go through this, and then we'll get into the financials of each project? So 423 is a little simpler because it does not have the faux facade in front. So the scope of this side for the 423 grant will be to simply remove the metal slip cover, as the other side, remove the metal awning, repair, clean any damaged brick in the process, and then put up a new cloth awning. And so when we kind of take a look at before and after for both, by completing the scope of work, we would have a similar a nicer, cleaner look.
Not nicer.
And so this is the two applicants that we have. So I'll go back. So the scope of the work on the 421, the Bandera side, is much larger. The overall cost of and so in working with Mike and getting his bids, the overall cost, or the quotes, two of them are $14,000, and then the other quote is $15,000 project, and so he is asking or requesting a $2,500 facade grant for 421, the Bandera side.
Bill, we've gone with blue mostly downtown, so why the stripe?
In my opinion, in working with communities in Louisiana over the years, when you have, if you vision Main Street, you got different heights of buildings, and you have alleyways, separating the buildings, and so you can go with solid colors because there's multiple breaks. My opinion, in working with a row of buildings where you got similar scale, same height, as in the Bastrop case here, if you get away from just a solid canopy and you introduce some stripe, it's going to, visually soften instead of just having this big runway impact. And that's just my opinion in working with communities.
Thank you, Phil. Anybody have any questions?
No, the cost of 423, you talked about.
Okay, I didn't know if you wanted to approve or vote on 421 before we go to 423. I can go ahead and introduce 423 if you'd like.
Yeah.
Please do. So 423, the scope is significantly less because there's less destruction, demolition as far as removing the metal canopy, the faux facade, and then cutting it, new plate window in. So on the right side, Jerry Lynn consignment side, the two quotes came in. One, they're similar in overall scope. One cost is $5,200 and the other was $5,600. And so the maximum amount allowed is a $2,500 grant request for the Jerry Lynn side as well.
Okay.
So two separate projects, each getting $2,500 to complete the scope.
Can we make a motion on one at a time or two?
There's two separate items. Let's do two separate
Let's
votes.
do two separate motions.
I'll make a motion, we approve the 421 Main, 421 Catawba request.
I'll
Yeah.
second that.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Opposed?
All right.
I'll make a motion, we approve the 423 Catawba Street request.
I second.
Got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed?
Okay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
4-1. Next item on the agenda is the Environmental Sustainability Board.
Yes, sir. So the next several items are just reports and their minutes from the meetings of your various advisory committees. So item 1 under reports is the Environmental Sustainability Board, the minutes from their most recent meeting. Item 2 is the minutes from the Main Street Advisory Board and Downtown Belmont Development Association September meeting. Item 3 under reports is the Planning and Zoning Board report. That's their minutes from their September meeting. Item 4 is the Belmont Tourism Development Authority's meeting minutes. And I will note on that, you recall, I believe it was at the July City Council meeting, the GGDC members came to City Council and requested funding from the city for $15,625 for year 4 of the GO campaign, and you approved that but requested that the Tourism Authority consider funding it through its occupancy taxes. And I appreciate the members of that board and Councilman Turner and Councilman Schrift. The Tourism Authority did vote at their September meeting to fund the full $15,625. So the city's contribution to the GO campaign will come from the occupancy taxes paid by visitors instead of by property taxes or sales taxes paid by our residents. So thank you to the Tourism Authority, Councilman Turner and Councilman Schrift on that.
Good job.
Item 5 under reports is Water and Sewer Committee meeting report. And item 6 is the manager's report, and just a couple updates on some upcoming meetings and events. We've had our Thursday night Pops concert series in Stowe Park. The final one is this Thursday night, October the 10th, from 6 to 8 p.m. Next Monday, October the 14th, the City of Belmont and TechWorks will co-host a welcome reception to the new manager for Gaston County, Dr. Kim Eagle. That will be from 5 to 6 p.m. at TechWorks, so please try to attend that if you can, and make her feel welcome. She obviously is working now in Gastonia and is moving from Kings Mountain to the Gaston County side, just outside of Bessemer City. So we want to get her over here to the east side.
Good for her.
The Parks and Recreation Citizen Advisory Board will meet on October the 16th at 6 p.m. here at City Hall, and they will receive an update on the Rocky Branch Park project, as well as a presentation from the Main Street Board on the dog park project. So those are the two things that we've been working on. There'll be a Movies in the Park event at Stowe Park on October the 19th. We have scheduled a ribbon cutting ceremony for the new tennis courts and pickleball courts at Davis Park. That will be held at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, October the 23rd. So please mark your calendars if you can make it. So we'll have a ribbon cutting.
Time, Adrian?
7 p.m. for Wednesday, October the 23rd.
Nice. Have you seen them?
We'll invite the Parks and Rec Board and the donors for that project. So we've still got a little bit of landscaping to do, but the tennis court part is finally complete.
It really looked good.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Now that the weather's cooled off, people are out there enjoying it. The Planning and Zoning Board will meet on October 24th at 7 p.m. That's a week later than normal because the planning staff is leaving tomorrow for the state planning conference. So they need an additional time to get that done. There'll be the Chronicle Mill rezoning and the Acme Mill property rezoning on that. So those will be two big items. And then our Boo Fest will be held at Stowe Park on Saturday, October the 26th. And just as an update, included in the budget this year was sidewalk repairs on Cedar Street, on the north side of Cedar Street. There's a sidewalk, a very old sidewalk that's in pretty bad shape. It connects Central Avenue to Sacco Street. That was an informal bidding project. We did award that to Asphalt or More, so that project will get started at the end of October and be finished by the 1st of December to make those repairs to Cedar Street. That is all that I have on the manager's report.
All right. Any other business that we have? We'll start out with Ryan.
Sure, just wanted to recognize members that keep Belmont beautiful. They had their sweep on Saturday, for which I'm assuming was yet another successful year. Do you have any positive remarks, Judy, you'd like to make?
Well, we had over 100 and some volunteers. I don't know yet how many bags they... 92 bags. We're kind of starting to put ourselves in a way out of business, which is a good thing. That's what we want to do, so there is less trash. We were happy to have it. We had hot dogs, things like that. And you need to look at our t-shirts. We're going to have a few of those to sell. But they were the best ones. We got a lot of compliments on those this year.
Good news. I'm sure everybody agrees on how much we appreciate the work that y'all are doing. I think one thing they were talking about at a city council meeting a few months ago that came back up at the last Keep Belmont Beautiful was about how folks are adopting these beds on Main Street. And I think it kind of went over my head when I heard it the first time. But at the Keep Belmont Beautiful this past month, there's individuals throughout the town who are adopting these beds on Main Street. They're going out and picking up the cigarette butts and the weeds. And so I'm not sure how they're getting more volunteers, but I know they'd like some. So if you're a member of a church or maybe an organization or just some individuals who can carve out some time.
This one here, Susan started it. It's called Flower Power.
Flower Power.
Flower Power. A special vest to wear with that one.
So keep that in mind if you know anybody who wants to help out. I think it's a great project. Certainly I know our staff can't handle every piece of garbage on a daily basis down there, so all the help we can get from the community is good, but that is all. Thank you.
Richard?
Yeah, the MPO meeting, which Martha also attended, there's an opportunity to do some special studies. There's some money available. Eligible activities, and the one that caught my eye, I think I talked to Adrian and Shelley about it, is the corridor study, which could either be South Point Road or the Belmont Mount Holly connector. There are other options here, which staff, I guess, can make a copy of this, bike ped, so on and so forth. The application is due October 31st, and it'll be awarded in June. But this process has been a little bit more formalized. So Adrian, I guess you and staff would have to get together. I don't know if you want council input on what that project might be, but it's a good opportunity to go ahead and get it. It does require a 20% local match, but it's essentially 80% free money for us to go ahead and get a study done on some traffic mobility on some of these corridors.
And I would suggest that we do a study on South Point Road corridor. I mean, we get the most complaints about traffic on South Point Road, obviously AM, PM peak. What we have found through the development process and the new TIA process that you approved is that, and this is not breaking news, but at times a day, South Point Road is just a hot mess. And there are some improvements that the Kimley Horn recommends that we do, but they're sort of one-off improvements to mitigate impacts of development. We haven't done a full corridor study to see what intersection improvements can be made, where you can have turn lanes, where you need full-on widening. We've requested improvements to South Point Road for years and years and years, and it's never scored well enough to get funded. So I think a comprehensive corridor study of South Point corridor would be a good way to have more data to present to the state when we're requesting widening. I know Richard's advocating for that, or excuse me, Councilman Turner's advocating for that at the NPO meetings, but having that corridor study with the data behind it would help. Of course, the trick is that most of South Point Road is outside the city limits, so I would want to partner with Gaston County on it.
Yeah.
So that we would both be advocating for those improvements. But if it's okay with the city council, we can ask the planning staff to work on the study and see if Gaston County is willing to partner with us on that, so we reduce the overall cost to Belmont.
Well, Adrian, let me, I would like to add one more thing. I don't know if you came up with this option or staff, or whether it was Randy Gates at the MPO, but what was happening with the South Point Road corridor is we were looking at it as a whole, and the cost was prohibitive. I mean, it was $40–50 million, probably in excess of that in reality. But the concept came up is to approach the DOT and the MPO is to chop that road up into segments and make presentations. Let's take it in bites instead of trying to eat the elephant in one bite, which I don't know if that can be part of the study or not, if it's going to be segmented or look at it as a whole.
I would think you'd look at it as a whole, but then they would break it down into kind of bite-sized projects that we could submit. And that's what we've done for the Spot 6.0 was sections of South Point Road for improvements. Because in the past, we've done either the whole thing or half of it, just the part that's in the city. And it's still very expensive. So you've got to get the part with the most congestion will score the best, but it's also expensive. So you want to limit the scope so that you just widen the worst sections at a time, or make intersection improvements with the worst sections, because it'll score the best and cost the least. But I think we need to have an overall vision for what it's going to be, so that it doesn't go from 2 lanes to 3 lanes to 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and no U-turns and no left turns, and then full access.
Michigan lefts.
Michigan lefts. So, I'd like to have a full corridor study, but then they'd have a recommendation section that would have projects we would submit for spot scoring.
That's your recommendation of South Point Road?
Yes, sir.
Council?
That's fine.
Doug?
Came down for Oktoberfest. That was a well-attended event and a ton of fun, and a lot of people down there with dogs supporting hopefully a dog park. So it was good.
I want to say Reed High School celebrated their 100th year anniversary at South Point High School football game the other night. I think that's an amazing achievement. There was a lot of people there from Reed High School, and it was just a great event, and the Red Raiders won 54-6. How about that? That was beat East Gaston. So that's a good thing. That's all I got to say. Martha?
I have 4 short items. 1, custom paving has both inconvenienced and irritated 3 developments now for almost 2 months. I think we seriously need to consider whether we would ever work with them again. We have a project that should have taken a week or 2, and once again, we're looking at 2 months. The parking issue on Stowe Road, with regard to, my understanding is that the sidewalks belong to the homeowners. Okay, we're in a serious situation there. We have little kids biking. We have Kathleen Boyce who walks to church on Sunday morning having to skirt around those cars. That's a serious safety concern. The women are probably going to come to you about this and not use my name. It's fine for them to use my name because it very much concerns me that we're looking at those little kids and Kathleen possibly falling or getting injured because they're having to go around cars that are parked on the sidewalk. The light rail has been evidently in print material. There's some information about that we need to fully get behind the light rail, and of course that's totally incorrect information. It was exciting to me to be a part of the Aviation Academy, and we are a done deal because all they talk about is how the light rail is coming, how we need to do this, and it's coming to the airport and Belmont. So we're in. We have over 200 people who came to the forum, and a number of you know that, but unfortunately we have print material that indicates otherwise, and that very much concerns me. The last is if we need to have a resolution to get the Harris Teeter lights taken care of, it's still tripping and impeding traffic. It's tripping with one car up in there all times of day and night. And so I don't know what they've not done or whether it resets itself, but whatever we need to do that. I'll call Mark tomorrow, but if we need to do a resolution, let us know so we can do that because it is a major issue. And that's mine.
Thank you. Ron?
I kind of hate to follow Martha. The South Point Road Corridor study is important, but it's also important because our water and sewer is in the right of way. That could be a major thing. Something very incidental. I was coming from Gaston up Eagle Road. I know that the trees on the left side coming into Belmont are controlled by the HOA, but the ones on the right are getting kind of ratty up underneath, and the ones there at Belmont Central are too. If you'll notice that when you ride through there, I mean, they need some trees underneath. But I know
you're going to do that, Ron?
I can. I don't mind.
You're retired.
I cut the hedge.
All right, he trims the hedges at Central. That's why I'm giving him a hard time.
Anything else, Ron?
Yes, sir.
That's it, okay. All right, we've got to go into,
I make a motion, we go into closed session.
motion to go into closed session, got a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Yeah, I'm trying to do too.
I gotta go to the restroom.
Take that, please.
Hold up, double.
Problem with that is, you have to go, front of it should be like.
I gotta tell you, it's late. We got through an awful lot of stuff. 2 hours of playing.
Well, the other thing is, when they did it, if you got 2 cars, they're gonna stick out.
Does Doug vote? That's
The
like,
development wasn't structured.
boy, last minute you had 2 bills.
If you live there, and I come to visit you.
On what?
You get to vote on 2 bills.